home in St. John's Wood. That's not bad for 3 years. I said to myself, isn't that really ridiculous? Remember last year when Paul and Heather McCartney announced they were getting divorced, and they said they would split amicably for the sake of their 3-year-old daughter Beatrice? I said, no way, and was right. The gloves eventually came off, and things got really nasty. After that, Paul changed the locks on his London mansion and froze their joint bank account. He even issued a legal letter claiming that his soon-to-be ex removed 3 bottles of cleaning fluid from his home. I'm not sure why that matters, but the accusation went public. In court documents, Paul claims that Heather was argumentative and rude to the staff during their marriage. Because they had no prenuptial agreement, she was pushing to get $400 million in the divorce. Now, there are reports that Heather was running around with a camcorder, shooting everything that happened to her. Allegedly, she's going to use the tapes against Paul to get more money. Or she's going to make a documentary about how she has been the poor, wronged victim in this whole ordeal, in order to sway public support. The bottom line is, she went after a huge chunk of Paul's money. She even destroyed the myth or fact of Paul's great marriage to Linda by disparaging it. I know I sound like a broken record, but when people have money, whether they're famous or not, they have to protect that money, no matter how much in love they think they are. Get a prenuptial agreement. I don't care how much you love your fiancé, it's just idiotic to get married without one. Don't believe me? Ask Paul McCartney what he thinks. I bet he wishes he had one. Last year, I spoke to a group of 20,000 people in Atlanta for the Learning Annex. A gorgeous woman got up to ask me if she could audition for The Apprentice. Let's call her Jennifer. The second I laid eyes on her, I knew she was hot, hot, hot. I said, "Come on up here to the podium, Jennifer. You're hired." She came up to the stage, and she brought her sister, who was equally gorgeous. I asked, "Are you both from Atlanta? Are you both married?" Jennifer was married, and her sister was single. I asked Jennifer, "Is your husband here?" She said no. I said, "Okay, there are only about 20,000 people here, and he's never going to find out. Have you ever cheated on your husband?" Jennifer said, "Truthfully, yes, I have to say that it was the worst thing I've ever done in my life, and I hope he'll forgive me." The crowd went wild, and the sister gasped in surprise and said she didn't even know about her sister's affair. I said, "In front of all these people, you admit you cheated like a dog." Jennifer said, "I don't lie." I said, "Do you have any friends here other than your sister? Because if you do, please tell them not to report you. That's the end of your marriage. Does your husband know about it?" She replied, "No." I said, "Do you have a prenuptial agreement?" She said, "No, I make more money than my husband." I said, "You're going to need one." The next question asked by an attendee was, "Where are interest rates going?" "How boring," I said. I've been talking about the importance of prenuptial agreements for many years, and maybe people are starting to listen. For example, I read that the Equality in Marriage Institute now gets about 5,000 inquiries a month about prenups, up from only 1,500 just a few years ago. 1 out of 10 first-time married couples get prenups. 9 out of 10 couples are living in a fool's paradise, expecting a life of eternal wedded bliss. After that first divorce, many of them wise up. 1 out of 5 couples get prenups before their second, third, or fourth marriages. That's amazing. After 3 divorces, a full 80% still refuse to have a prenup. It seems that a whole lot of people never want to get a prenuptial agreement. Why? 43% of them say they don't need a prenup because, get this, they don't plan to ever get divorced. That's stupid. Who ever plans to get a divorce when they're first getting married? Nobody. 5% of people who do not get a prenup are afraid of asking their spouse for a prenup. They think their fiancé will refuse to sign and call off the wedding. I know, it's a horrible thing to have happen, but there are worse things, like losing all your money. When I heard that Nick Lachey and Jessica Simpson were splitting up, I wasn't surprised. People change quickly, especially when they're in their 20s. They're still discovering who they are. When Nick and Jessica first met, his career was bigger than hers. After their reality TV show, her career really took off, and his did too, but to a lesser extent. Nick and Jessica did not sign a prenuptial agreement. Jessica's father has done a great job managing Jessica's career. I can't understand why he didn't insist that the couple get a prenup. Jessica and Nick were hoping for a nice, amicable divorce. Surprise, surprise. It didn't happen that way. Nick asked for alimony, and a lot of it. He wanted 50% of Jessica's money. She made an estimated $35 million in 2005 alone. It wasn't pleasant. When it was all said and done in December 2006, I'll bet Nick got a big chunk of cash. You should have a prenup. I know it sounds terrible, and there's nothing romantic about it. It's a hard subject to talk about with someone you love. Where a lot of money and assets are concerned, it's vital. You never know about love, but you do know that when the love is gone, there will be a knockdown, drag-out fight over the assets. It always happens, unless you have a prenup. In your business, you always determine ahead of time what will happen if the business relationship comes to an end. It is the responsible thing to do. Why not do the same thing with your personal relationship? Sure, it's not pleasant, but it makes a lot of sense to define how things will be divided if the two of you call it quits. A prenup can spare you most of the messiest, most unpleasant aspects of a divorce. These days, a prenup is just as important to women as it is to men. I've seen many cases recently where a woman makes a lot of money and the man does not, and the woman ends up having to pay big money to the husband. The fact is, whether you are a man or a woman, you need the certainty. It's really important. You always have to expect problems. You can solve the problem in advance, before it happens, with the certainty of a prenuptial agreement. Settle while you are friends, not enemies. In all honesty, it's not pretty. A prenuptial agreement is a horrible instrument. I met Melania, and we fell in love and decided to get married. I said, "Melania, you are so beautiful. I love you so much, and we're going to have the greatest marriage ever. It's going to be unbelievable. Listen, just in case it doesn't work, sign on the dotted line. It's not exactly the most romantic thing to do, but you really need it." Zanker's take. There are many people I do business with on a handshake. I trust them, and they trust me. We still write down what we agreed to, even if it's just an email. We write down the basics of the agreement, so that neither of us will feel taken advantage of, confused about the relationship, or resentful that the other person forgot an important term. I call that an email handshake. The reason is that it's so easy to forget what we agreed to. It's not that we are ever going to fight over something, and it's not necessary in these situations to have a big formal contract that involves lawyers and has all the what-ifs and says which state law is going to apply if one of us sues the other. I learned the importance of this the hard way. I once saw an ad in the Wall Street Journal that a bunch of ski condos were being auctioned off. I investigated and thought it was a good deal. That week, I was having dinner with a friend, let's call him Howard, and mentioned I was flying to the auction the next day. He said, "If it's a good deal, buy one for me too." He gave me a down payment check on the spot. I immediately said, "Okay, but listen, since I'm doing all the work on this one, just promise me that if you ever sell, you'll give me the right of first refusal." He agreed. I finished up the due diligence for both of us, and the next day bid successfully on 2 condos. A couple of years later, I was going on a ski vacation to my condo, and I called Howard, because I needed to rent his condo to some friends who were joining us. "The ski condo," he said. "I sold it a couple of months ago. I got a great price." I didn't say anything. I just congratulated Howard on making a good deal. I was seething inside. He probably forgot, and if he did, it's probably because we did not bother to write down our little deal. I should have at least done an email handshake. I introduced a very, very good friend of mine to an acquaintance in the late 80s. They didn't like each other at first, but I kept on insisting they would get along and create great business together. In fact, I proposed that all three of us would be very powerful doing a deal together. They didn't like each other, no matter how hard I tried. Then, the two of them met at a fundraiser and got to be friends. A few months later, I see they're doing business together, and they completely cut me out. They didn't even tell me. I just happened to hear about it. I was furious. I called my friend on it, and he had the nerve to say, "But we didn't have a written contract between us." I was livid. I hung up the phone on him. I never talked to my friend again, and 9 months later, he died of a heart attack at a young age. I always wonder if screwing me was worth it to him, and if the stress of treating people that way contributed to his heart attack. Maybe it was just the bad karma I was sending him. To sum it up, many people go into marriage with blinders on, thinking that nothing will ever go wrong. They would not dream of buying a house without a guarantee from the owner covering them if something goes wrong. When it comes to marriage, the old saying is still true: love is blind. The truth is that there is a 58% chance your marriage will fail, and you'll end up divorced. Very few people plan for it because they're afraid to confront the subject when they're so in love. A prenup is a horrible document. There's nothing nice about it, but it's much better than the alternative. Points to remember. People's lives get destroyed because they did not have a prenup. 58% of marriages end in divorce. Do not let love cloud your judgment. There's nothing more terrible than a man and a woman who used to love each other, clawing at each other's throats over money and property.